I really love bacon, and I always have. When my wife used to babysit kids and we'd make breakfast and they would eat all the bacon before I would get a chance to get any, I used to be pretty upset about that. My family heritage included butchering on both sides of my family. My mother's side, which were from the south, and my father's side, which was from southeastern Pennsylvania, this area right here, actually, the Pigeon Hills. And as I was growing up, I heard stories of butchering and being self-sufficient. And so I just thought it would be a nice thing to do for our family, because we are into self-sufficiency. And my wife's family especially tries to find any excuse they can to get together and have a party. So, so we found it to be especially rewarding to get the family together once a year and do some hog butchering. So did you build this trailer?
Yeah.
You did a good job.
Yeah, that's nice.
Sure.
Good deal.
It's perfect for what you do. Yep.
You ready?
Yep. Just take your time.
Who's on camera?
Yeah. You've done this quite a few times already, haven't you? So we try to do everything the way they did years ago. We try to make as much use out of the animal as we can. We try to we make pun hoss, which is also known as scrapple, and we also make lard, which is a staple. We've tried scalding the hogs, which was the really old-time way, and we've done that already, and now we've been skinning the hogs, and which most people prefer that. The whole process is just very tiring, but we look forward to it, but also look forward to getting done, because we're usually wore out by the time that the process is done. So this is just the icing on the cake here, getting to try our new bacon for the year. It won't be too long here till it's ready to eat. Another thing I wanted to mention is that we try to do the old-fashioned country curing, and which is a pleasure. To try to duplicate how they did things years ago before they had refrigeration and freezers, for the way they were able to preserve their meat doing that. So I think our bacon here is about done, and I'm going to get it out here, and we're going to do a little sampling of that. And I'm using this 3-pronged fork that my daughter-in-law loves so much. I'm using that special for her. Of course, I'm just picking on her by doing that. This is the bacon fork.
I hate that fork.
Dad would always talk about this, and he'd always say, you know, I'd really like to do this again someday. He said, he said, my dad raised them a couple times, and he said, I really enjoyed that. He said, we should do that. So one year, one of my friends in school, we started this probably about 6-7 years ago, doing the hog butchering and stuff. And one year in school, one of my friends that I was in the Future Farmers Club with, somebody told me that he had some piglets, that one of his sows had piglets. So I talked to him, and he said, yeah, he said, I'll sell you some piglets. So we went over to his place over by East Berlin, and he sold us 2 piglets. So this was a new thing to us. We never did anything. We had this old pen here. We had tried horses for a little while. We're back here in the woods, so they didn't work. So we had this old horse pen, and we decided, well, we're going to see if it works for pigs. So the first year we took and put chicken wire up and stuff, and worked all right. I put some electric wire. They still got out where there wasn't these kind of fences. They get through the electric wire. So we spend half the time chasing these dumb pigs around. We got them in like August, and come February, we decided we were going to kill these things. And we'd never done this before. We figured they were like 300 some pounds. So a guy at Dad's work said, I'll come up and show you how to kill them. He said, I've been doing this a long time. He come up here, he looked at these hogs and goes, they're a lot bigger than that. We killed them. We took them down to a butcher before we had our setup in here with the cooler and stuff. We took it down to a friend of ours who's a butcher, and he put them on the scales and weighed them after they were already dead. And he said one was probably about 450 live, and one was about 500. Whereas all the ones we buy now are about 3 to 350. They were huge hogs. We hung them from the bucket of the backhoe, and their noses touched the ground. I mean, they were huge. And we got so much lard, it was like 4 inches of fat on them from all that slop feeding. But that was our first experience with it. So then the next year we thought, well, we're gonna try this again. So we got 3 from a guy, and again, they were running all over the place. So we redid our fence, and it went better that year. Well, we killed them, and then the next year I graduated from high school and met my wife and got married, and Dad said, well, I'm not raising them myself. He said, so we're gonna buy them from now on. So we started buying them from the guy we get now, which in the long run it's easier. I don't know. It is, he gives us some really good deals. It's about the same as if we'd have to buy feed. It would probably be more expensive for us to actually raise them than it would be for him to raise them. But that's how we got started. We just 6, 7, 8 years ago, whatever it is now, we just one day decided, let's do it. Let's try it. Let's stop talking about it and try it. And we keep doing it every year, and we love it. It's a good way to get the family together. It's a good way to spend New Year's. We always do it New Year's weekend, and it's always family and fellowship. And we've had some friends come and do it with us every year. It gives us all a reason to get together, and in the long run, it helps us. It helps us with our food larders for the year. I know for me and my wife and our little girl, a hog is more than enough to get us through the year. Had a little bit of a spill there. Like this one to my shoulder, and here the damn thing was on. Is it all done?
Yeah. Put it away. Sorry.
You got any fire going yet?
Yeah.
You can flip that later. Let me try it once. If it gets lumpy, you might have to just stir it longer. Alright. So we got a good fire on this now.
Good.
Take them off like that and set them like this. Yeah, that's fine. We did. We had the door open. I'm afraid of eating the wood off the wing out.
Cutting in line in the soup kitchen.
I'm creating a new line. I flow it in there.
Everybody, my ancestors wise that I knew, my great grandparents on both sides of my family butchered, and I, heard stories from all of them. From the making of the pawn horse to the cleaning of the casings. They would use the bladder. They made sausage with the bladder, but they also could use the bladder to seal the crock. They would take the bladder after they filled the crock with the puddings and lay the bladder across the top and put a string around it to tie it, and then when it dried, it made like a lid. And all different kinds of things. We put everything in the freezer today, but back then they would pack their meat in crocks or a hoxet, which is a big wooden barrel, and they would stuff it with salt, because they didn't have no freezer, or smoke it. But if you wanted fresh meat, the fresh way to do it was to put it in that hoxet and pack it with salt. And then they would, when they wanted a loin or whatever, you go to the Hoxit and dig it out of the salt, and you had it. Nothing that I experienced, that's just stuff I know. It's like 50, 60 years since that generation did it, but it's because of, you know, after World War II and the accessibility of going to the store, it got forgotten. A lot of this stuff, especially like the cleaning of the intestines and using them, and all the parts of the pig that can be used, the people got away from it because they could just go to the store and buy their sausage. And we just noticed while we started this that nobody here under the age of 60 knew anything about cleaning intestines, so we had to try it and give it a try. We wanted to learn how to do it. But I heard stories about that since I was a kid. You know, we're doing this to learn how to do it. It saves us money, and we're just trying to revive some of the old world ways and learn how to do it. But those people had to do it out of necessity. It had to be done, you know. It was the only way they survived. If they got piglets and they had 3 and they lost one, that was a big loss for their livelihood. That could mean life or death getting through winter. And that's only 110, 20 years ago, especially for the people in rural communities. So it's pretty important to learn the past and try to keep some of it alive, so if we ever come to that point again, we don't starve to death. So,
like Sean said, we don't have to rely on the meat as much as what they did in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This generation is very spoiled in the fact that we can, if we need meat, we can go to the store and pick out what we want, and that night it's on our table frying. Back then they didn't have that. They had to live off of what they had. If they ate all the meat before next fall when they butchered again, they didn't have any more pork. That was it until fall when they killed more. And then they'd have to live off of other stuff. And we're just very fortunate as a generation, and not too many people realize that. A lot of people don't realize anymore where their food actually comes from or how it starts. And I think that's another reason that we enjoy this so much, because in the future we can pass it down to our kids, and it's just something that I hope will live on. I hope our kids all take it over and keep going and going and going. And someday, like Sean said, maybe there will be a necessity that you got to do this to eat, but hopefully it don't get that way. But people don't realize how fortunate they are anymore. And it's just, it's fun to be able to do this and live out a piece of history every year. And I'm really, really glad that I got a wife that's willing to sit there and scrape pig intestines out for sausage casing. We were all ready to give up on it, and she was determined to make it work, because she wanted to do from head to toe on that hog, and she got it. She figured it out. So next year we're gonna put more time in it. But I'm very fortunate I got a wife that's not afraid to get her hands dirty.
Landon is my husband, and when I met him, I knew nothing about processing or butchering pigs or deer or pretty much any animal. I didn't know anything about it, and it's just been really cool to be able to learn these things, learn these skills, and for him to be able to teach me a little bit, and for us to learn together these skills of processing and butchering our own food is so helpful. To be able to do this kind of stuff, as a financial aspect to it, it saves us hundreds of dollars, and the quality of meat is way better than what you can get in the store. I mean, pork chops in the store are like this thick. We can get our pork chops, like, it's a good hefty piece of meat. So just, and being able to, you know, get these, we know where the meat's coming from. You know, in the store you don't, you know it comes from a farm, but you don't know which farm it came from. You don't know what the farm owners did with their animals. You don't know what they fed them. We know we got them locally sourced from a good farmer friend of ours. And we know that he's good to his animals. He knows he gives them good food, and it's just, it's good fun. It's dirty, it's hard work, but it's good fun.
This is like the best thing to do. You can like never not do this. I'm making this fat get cooked brown. You see how I'm doing it? Just stir it and stir it and stir it. It's pretty fun.
Pretty fun?
Mm-hmm. Like if you want to have fun, this is better than screaming on a roller coaster.
I like the way you look at that.
A lot of work though, isn't it? You're working the house.
Yeah. I can only, this seems so easy, but it isn't. Just, you seemed like this is a lot of light work. Hello. No, it's a lot of hard work. It's really heavy though. This isn't light to me because, well, I've been lifting a lot of things. In my baby period was like epic. My baby period was the best.
I've been a butcher since about 2008. I don't butcher anymore, but I spent about 10 years butchering. A little bit of the history, some of it's already been delved into, the ancient history, but the more modern history was there was a lot more butcher shops that would have USDA inspectors, and they would come in and they would slaughter beef and pigs and other animals. They would be inspected for quality, diseases, abscesses, things like that. So you want to inspect the meat, check glands. And when you're saving everything, you can save the tongue out of here, all the head meat, the jowl meat, all the stuff here. We have 3 hogs already done up. We've got 3 more hanging. This is what's going to be in our sausage. That'll get ground up. You'll add your seasonings, and then you can either bag it loose, what they call loose sausage. The only difference is if you use intestine cases, what was normally used, it was usually saved out of the hogs to make your sausage casings. That's the tubes that the meat goes into. So we'll grind this all up later on today, mix it up, bag it and stuff it, you know, for whatever people want in their meat. We typically write down everything out of the hog that we want to do. How many chops per pack? That's your typical old school butchering methods. You have a cutting table here, bringing them in half at a time. Up here on the table, we'll take a saw, cut the hocks off, cut the feet off, separate out all what's called subprimals, and then we'll break them down either on a bandsaw or you can use a knife. But since they have bones in them, we use a bandsaw to cut through the meat. In the grocery store setting, most grocery store clerks now, they're not even meat cutters anymore. There's a few grocery stores that have gotten away from it. They just mass produce all the cuts into prepackaged packs that go right to a grocery store now. Most old school meat cutters, some can remember back upon a time from like up to about the 80s, maybe even the 90s, where grocery stores got away and just went into cryovac boxed beef. So you would take it out and either cut it with a knife if it was boneless, or if it had a bone in it, and cut it on a saw. Now they don't even have, some butcher shops have sold all the equipment out of it. They don't even have it anymore. So even the basic knowledges of cutting up chops or steaks or anything like that on a saw is being lost to the ages because, well, it's all done in factories now. But the problem is, I think it's a little short-sighted because the long haul is, as these generations die off, that knowledge is going to be ever more lost. And they haven't invented a machine yet that I know of that can render a beef or a pig down. But you lose the choice too. If you want a certain size chop, some people like them thin, some people like it thick. You're losing so much of that it's hard to imagine what it's going to look like in another 10 years, because within the last 10 years, they've pretty much done away with cutting inside of grocery stores across America. Takes away jobs, skilled labor jobs for people in their local communities. You don't know where your food comes from. You don't know how your food is made. So, and you're losing it to bigger and bigger conglomerates that have bought up pretty much all the real estate and all the business but when you have a local farmer and local butchers, you can guarantee a better quality product, and with people you know in your community. See that? There's the loin in there. With a saw, they start up here and go, and you want to cut it nice and even so that the way there's a cavity within the spinal cavity here, so that way you can get all the spinal cord out.
What's that?
This piece of meat.
It's cool.
Yeah, part of what's called the skirt or the breathing muscle. It's what helps support the lungs.
Now what's all this?
This is fat. It's just the fat off the animal.
There's a lot of fat.
It is. There's a lot of fat on pigs.
How big?
And it's very gooey. See, if you pinch it, it's very... Pig fat's a lot different than beef fat.
Pigs are really big.
Mm-hmm.
And what's that right there?
That's the ham.
Oh, the ham.
Yep, this is the ham here. And these are the ribs. So you got ribs, don't you?
All right, well, this is deer meat and pork mixture here. We already ground all our pork, and we usually like to save our deer meat throughout the year and do stuff with it after deer season's over, make bologna, make sausage, make burger as we need it. We always like to save the deer meat and mix it in with some pork because it makes things go a little farther. Instead of having 30 pounds of pork and 40 pounds of deer burger or something, now we have 70 pounds of deer sausage, which has pork mixed in it to take away some of the gamey deer flavor. But it still tastes like sausage. It's got all the same ingredients in it as our pork sausage. It just has 2/3 deer in it and 1/3 pork. So we do that to make things just go a little farther, and to use everything that we have, use the pork and the deer, and it still tastes like sausage. It just gives it a little, to us, a better flavor. Some people don't care for deer meat, but we do, so we like to do that just to make things go a little farther. Today's our sausage making day. We seasoned everything last night when we got done cutting and stuff, so today we're grinding and they're stuffing and putting in bags down there. They're going to be doing rope sausage for this, and some of the fresh stuff is going to be rope. We're doing this to kill time while we're waiting on the pond hoss bones to get done cooking, and then we're going to take, and when they get done cooking, we're going to pick them off and run them through the grinder, and then everything goes back in the kettles and gets cornmeal and flour and salt and pepper mixed with it, and then that's the start of our pond hoss, and that's got to cook down. But this is just a time killer for now until that stuff comes out of the kettle. So we just try and make as much time as we can, and everybody has a job to do, and we do it. So.
So this sugar cure recipe, I tried when we first started doing this. I was around it when I was younger, but at that age I really didn't pay attention to all the ingredients. I know my dad used to do it, and I never really paid that much attention of the different recipe that he used for the sugar cure. And so when we started doing this, I searched and found some recipes and tried them, and wound up improvising and modifying the recipes that we found, and till finally I added a little bit of this and subtracted a little bit of that until finally now we got it to where we like it. It just was a trial and error of playing with it and tinkering with it, and I think we got it pretty good now. It's the old time way of doing it, and we take and do a rub, and then the bacons here, they sit, like I said before, they'll sit for about 2 days like this, and during that time you'll see the juice will run out of it and down onto the floor, and that means that the cure is working. When you see that, that's good. That's what you want to see, because that means it's soaking into the meat. Now the hams, again, like I said before, it takes longer with the hams because it's a bigger piece of meat. After the curing is done, then I have a smokehouse that I built, and I do cold smoking, where you don't use a hot fire. That's why they call it cold smoking. You just do a cold, subtle smoke, which draws into the meat and flavors it without cooking it. Now, my understanding is you can't sell it to the public that way, and places that do sell it to the public, when they smoke it, they get their meat up to 150, 160 degrees, which makes it legal to sell to the public. But we don't sell to the public, so we just do the cold smoke, and the cold smoke is really the old traditional way. You still get the flavor, and you're not actually cooking the meat. Now, with the preservative in here, the meat doesn't spoil after it draws the cure in, so it really doesn't have to be cooked. The curing agent keeps it from spoiling. So this is something that we do this for several reasons, but one was like my son would kill quite a few deer every year, so we needed pork to add with the deer meat from the deer he'd shoot. So then we started doing pigs, so that we had pork to add with the deer meat. Well, it sort of kept growing into what it is now, where friends and family get involved in it, which is great. We love the whole family experience and carrying on the old time traditions. So it's a lot of work. I actually sort of kind of dread it when I think about it ahead of time, but yet at the same time, I look forward to it because it's a good family time. We get to eat together, some really good old country meals, and have some good time of fellowship together. Now, if you take notice, this one here is changing colors already. It's starting to turn dark. And what that is that's the curing agent starting to work. It's actually turning the meat a darker color. The curing agent is a sodium nitrite, which, well, best I can say, it does something to the moisture in the meat, in the cells of the meat, that it keeps it from spoiling. Years ago, before they had refrigeration, this is the way they had to cure their meat, or keep their meats, by the curing. That way they really didn't need refrigeration or freezers to keep their meat. And when you cure this meat, like the ham especially, but you try to get it in alongside the bone like that, because now these small pieces here isn't too much of a concern with that, but the hams, you got to make sure you get that in down alongside the bone in order to penetrate the whole way through that big piece of meat. Curing hams can be a little tricky because it's such a thick piece. Sometimes it doesn't get the whole way down into the bone, and that's where they'll spoil, is in here around the bone. So I was told by some knowledgeable old timers that you take and try to squeeze it down alongside that bone there. That's called the H bone. You try to squeeze it down in there the best you can and get some penetration on it, and then that'll soak down in there, and it'll work its way down in along the bone. So far, knock on wood, I've done probably about 25 hams and haven't lost any yet, so I'm pretty happy with that.
Every culture, every race of people in the United States in particularly did something, unless they didn't eat hogs for a religious reason. They butchered, you know, and it's important. I don't know how to say it. It's important for them to step back and you know, you can't live in the past, but it's definitely important to remember the past so you know where you came from and you retain some of these skills, because they are important in life and make you a better person, especially if you know where your ancestors are from and what they did.